You're listening to In Our Headphones.
Your chance to discover the songs KEXP DJs don't want you to miss. I'm Janice Headley.
And I'm Isabel Khalili. And this is your never-ending source for new music discovery from listener-powered KEXP. Hey, it's Isabel, and today I'm very excited to present an episode that should be very soothing because it's an episode that's all about ambient music. You're going to be hearing song recommendations and reflections from a few different voices, including KEXP DJs and members of our editorial team. It's basically a group of us who are curators and fans of ambient, neoclassical, and experimental music. And we thought we could put together a useful offering for those in our headphones listeners who might be seeking some moments of peace right now. And to start us off, I'm joined by Alex Reuter, who has appeared many times on this show as KEXP's associate music director, but he's also a DJ and the host of KEXP's ambient and neoclassical show called Pacific Notions. Alex, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Isabel. Excited to get to chat about some ambient music.
Mm-hmm. So for this episode, like I mentioned, I'll be passing the mic around to a few of our friends at KEXP. But first, I wanted to talk to you about where your love of ambient music began and what ambient means to you now.
Yeah, I think my journey towards ambient music was kind of a winding road because it was not music I was familiar with or a fan of growing up. I was definitely a kid who grew up on a lot of hip hop and R&B back in the 90s. Listening to the radio in middle school and high school. And it was towards the end of high school, like my senior year, which was 2000 to 2001, starting to use the internet a little bit more to discover music that wasn't being played on mainstream radio. So that led me to check out more underground hip hop. And then that led me to some more electronic leaning stuff through producers like Dan the Automator, who did the production on the Deltron 3030 album and the Dr. Octagon album. Those were incredibly influential albums to my ears at that time. That soon led me to DJ Shadow. And so I got more into electronic music and kind of down-tempo IDM type music throughout college. And when I started doing college radio, I did an electronic music show and getting more into artists like Aphex Twin, Boards of Canada. And all that kind of stuff. And so I started gradually getting more into more chill out music along the way, and eventually kind of started realizing there was just pure ambient music out there that I was a big fan of. I think it's just part of digging into different sounds and kind of finding what resonates with your ears. And I love chaotic sounding music at times, but I also really am a big fan of just music you can get lost in, instrumental music that you can kind of just have be the soundtrack to your day. And so eventually realized like, oh, I like ambient music. Big fan of this.
I am too, and I think many people are. And Alex, we're going to hear from you again at the end of this episode with a new release that you're excited to share. But for our first song, I've asked you to bring in something that's a good tone setter, perhaps an older song that you feel is foundational to your understanding of this style of music to kind of start off this episode. So what song did you choose for this?
Yeah, the song I chose to be the kind of foundational tone setting track for my kind of journey to ambient music is a tune by the artist Helios, one of the aliases of the American musician Keith Caniff. A track of his titled First Dream called Ocean. That's off his 2006 album titled Aingia, which I'm still not sure what that word means. This album hit me at kind of a ideal time in my listening history. 2006 was actually my first full year out of college, after doing college radios, my first full year volunteering at KEXP, and at the time I was a DJ assistant reviewing a bunch of different music behind the scenes for the station, helping out DJs. I was coming out of college radio doing an electronic music show, being the station's electronic music director. And when this album came out, it was just one of those albums I'd put on many nights just to kind of like zone out and relax to. It's a beautiful album. All 11 tracks, start to finish, I think are wonderful. It's still a go-to ambient album in my opinion. But First Dream, called Ocean, is one of the standout tracks off the album. That track in particular is one that means a lot to me because it's actually the very first song I played on the very first edition of Pacific Notions when the show launched back in 2019.
Aw. Well, listeners can tune into your show, Pacific Notions, every Sunday morning. They can wake up to this very soothing blanket of ambient music from 6 to 9 a.m. Let's take a listen now to a little more of this song. It's called First Dream, called Ocean by Helios. And after that, we'll be hearing from some new voices. And at the end, we'll return to this conversation with Alex. Thanks for listening.
My name is Dusty Henry, and I'm the Associate Director of Editorial and co-host of the Cobain 50 podcast on KEXP. Ambient music to me is about environment, the space that it exists, the space that you listen to it, and how all these things feed together to create this cosmic experience that feels like it extends beyond yourself. KMRU's music has always felt like that to me. It feels like the epitome of everything I feel like ambient is about. KMRU is an artist originally based from Nairobi, Kenya, and now out of Berlin. His music is this perfect blend of field recordings and original electronic sounds. Some of his earlier work included recordings from Nairobi, around the markets, around town, or you hear people chattering, you hear the sounds at night. It creates sort of this mystical quality, even if it's just a normal place in our real world. It feels something even bigger than that. And his latest record, Forge, I don't know exactly where it was recorded. He's always recording all around the world. But on his Bandcamp page, he has a very short description. Through the noise of every day, a transition to stillness, which to me epitomizes this record, but also epitomizes what he's all about. His music creates that sense of stillness for me. It's this peaceful wave of just warmth, of tenderness, even wordless, the chatter in the backgrounds, the noises. It creates this beautiful spectrum of ambiance. It's getting kind of heady, but it's a powerful feeling that's hard to describe. And the song I picked from Forge is the first song, called Opener. And of course, Opener likely referring to it being the opening track. But I also keep this idea in mind of through the noise of every day, the transition to stillness. It's about like opening yourself up to the world, to opening yourself to being still. Life in the world feels more chaotic every day. But in KMRU's music, I find that stillness and I find that beauty of that chaos when you can blend it with a sound or bigger ideas bigger than yourself. You can really find something beautiful and meaningful. KMRU's music always helps me find that peace from record to record, and I hope you enjoy this one.
My name is Brit Hansen. I'm one of the hosts of Expansions. It's our weekly Sunday night electronic dance music show. Ambient music holds a really special place for me, and I like to work in at least one or two chill room moments into the shows that I host. You know, ambient music was a massive part of my introduction to electronic music all up. I remember as a kid just exploring through my parents' vinyl collection and just really connecting with these Jean-Michel Jarre albums. And then again, late in high school, kind of rediscovering ambient music with the Orbs 1991 album, The Orbs Adventures Beyond the Ultra World, which is, I think, the closest thing to a post-1990 ambient classic that we have. There's so much ambient music out there. And honestly, it doesn't take much to create a piece of audio that you could definitely call ambient music. But it's one of those genres that if you get it, you get it. I've got a playlist that I've been adding to for years now. It's all very pretty, mellow, washy ambient. And there's literally 5 days of it on this playlist. It's been an invaluable tool for dealing with anxiety these past 3, 4, 5, and counting years. With my pick 4 in-hour headphones, though, I want to touch on something a bit outside of this calm, cozy, meditative music that occupies most of the ambient airwaves, if those exist. I've seen it called stadium ambient or maximalist ambient. You've still got all the core markers represented, field recordings of nature, bubbling synths and drawn-out washes of sound shimmering through psychedelic delays, etc. Imagine that, but metal. Maybe there's a few too many layers, things are distorted into these noisy blurs. I don't imagine that many people, if they weren't already looking forward to it, would be able to stay relaxed in a massage or meditatively visualize the chord of light that grounds them to the earth with this music. The song I've chosen is How Heavy the Slow World from Austyn Wohlers' album Body Melt in the Garden of Death. You know, it's right there in the title, like maybe roll the yoga mat back up. Across its runtime, the album weaves in and out of being serene and bucolic one moment, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into the middle of a cicada tornado until it passes and you're watching the grass sway gently in the breeze again. It's a really nice contrast that can catch you off guard when it smacks you right in the face in the middle of a song. But How Heavy the Slow World drops you right into the abrasiveness at the start. And the rest of the song is sort of an arm wrestling match between distortion and butterflies that shifts the balance of power between them in waves that build up over the course of the song. At the end, the birds win, the cicadas move on, and that grounding light chord is right there where you left it.
That was a bit of How Heavy the Slow World by Austyn Wohlers, and I know that after hearing Brit's description of this song with the cicadas and the butterflies and this tug of war, I was really eager to listen to the whole song. And if you feel the same way, I recommend you start following our playlist that saves all of these recommendations from In Our Headphones so that you can listen to all of these songs in full. You can find versions of the playlist on both Spotify and YouTube, and there are links to those on the In Our Headphones podcast page on kexp.org. Next up, I'm passing the mic to Roddy Nikpour.
My name is Roddy Nikpour. I'm a podcast producer with KEXP, and the song that I chose for this ambient edition of In Our Headphones is Windows by Evan Chapman, a composer based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I get picked from a bunch of different ambient songs that I'm listening to and really relying on right now, heading into winter. But this song comes from Evan Chapman's third solo album called Reveries. It came out on Better Company Records in October 2024. The first thing that literally brought me to this album was how connected I was to it without even realizing it. I discovered this album through another musician and friend of mine who designed the album artwork. Shout out to Brock Lefferts. When I went to investigate, I discovered that Evan Chapman is also 1/3 of another band that I really like called Square Peg Round Hole, which also has a similar percussion-heavy ambient post-rock sound, very reminiscent of bands that I miss, like Limbic System. Another thing that pulls me into this album is the inspiration behind the album, which has been 2 years in the making. On Better Company Records' website, Evan says that he had 3 months off of work when his daughter was born, and so between the time off and the new role of parenthood, he found inspiration for what he calls like a childlike musical exploration, playing new instruments, taking new approaches to old instruments, just absolutely experimental and motivated by such a deeply meaningful life experience. It was really hard to pick just one song from this album, but I'm choosing Windows because it represents a lot of what I like about the album as a whole. The first half of this song is really ambient, kind of unassuming, lots of droning synths, and then about halfway through this track, around the 4-minute mark, this really propulsive drum beat kicks in. And it swells up so emotively throughout the song. It's just extremely cathartic without being overstimulating. And as a whole, this album combines electronic ambience and acoustic instruments like mallets and stand-up bass. As a whole, it's surprisingly jazzy, surprisingly dynamic, and dare I say, surprisingly danceable at times. It's definitely in the realm of ambient and instrumental, but it can also still magnify your big feelings, which is why I'm recommending it to you now. It's easy music to help you take care of yourself and process everything around you. And it does so while being technically interesting on a musical level, keeps your mind busy and wondering how he's doing all this stuff in the first place. So listen to more instrumental music. I promise it's good for you. And the album is called Reveries by Evan Chapman.
That was Evan Chapman with the track Windows, chosen by Roddy. And now, before returning to my conversation with Alex, I have one song to share. It's from Nala Sinephro's album that came out in early September called Endlessness. I've been a fan of this composer and multi-instrumentalist since her 2021 debut called Space 1.8. She has a way of fusing jazz and ambient and electronic in a really subtle but powerful way. She strikes me as an artist who really allows space for her ideas to grow, and that's probably what makes her ideas so good. I love this about ambient music in general and what it can do for us as listeners too. It encourages us to be still, to pay attention, to notice our surroundings, and to find meaning in small things. So on this new album called Endlessness, Nala Sinephro finds meaning in one particular, seemingly small thing, and that's the repeated ascending arpeggio that the album is built upon. She explores the arpeggio as a theme through a series of tracks, all titled Continuum. And as you can imagine from the titles, it doesn't feel like any of the tracks really end. One just morphs into the next, like a continuum of observation and repetition. Some moments are noisy and dissonant, percussion heavy. Others are sweeping and orchestral. I could have chosen any of these tracks today, but I decided to share the fourth track called Continuum 4. It's maybe the most cinematic take on the theme. It features strings and a synth motif that could easily place it in a romantic scene of a sci-fi film. And like the album as a whole, it reminds me of how these small things can become grand with practice, care, attention, and space. So this track is beautiful. Nala Sinephro is definitely one to watch if you're not already. And here's some of the track. It's Continuum 4 from the album Endlessness. That was a bit of Nala Sinephro's Continuum 4 from the album Endlessness. It's out now on Warp Records. And as promised, we're finishing the episode with one more new song recommendation from our associate music director and host of Pacific Notions, Alex Reuter. Alex, what song are you spotlighting today?
Yeah, I want to spotlight a song off a new release that I've been really loving. It's a new solo release from Cleveland-based musician Mark McGuire. He put out a bit of a surprise EP the beginning of November. It's titled Anhedonia, which is an EP I've been getting a lot of joy from, but it took me, in leading up to having this conversation, that's what inspired me to look up what this word meant. And it actually means the inability to experience joy or pleasure. Makes me very curious why Mark named this EP that. I'm kind of curious what the backstory is there. But this is just a really beautiful EP that really spotlights the type of just kind of euphoric instrumental music that Mark McGuire makes. He's someone I've been a fan of for a really long time. He kind of emerged as one of the founding members of the trio Emeralds back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, and they put out some amazing instrumental music back then. Since that group disbanded, he's been putting out some really cool solo music for over a decade now. Always super intrigued by what he's putting out. And this new EP, just a wonderful reflection of the type of guitar heavy music he puts out. The title track in particular, Anhedonia, has been one I've been going back to a lot. There's just a wonderful movement to the track that he's able to create through the different layering of guitars. And then the song also at the end has this speech that's kind of layered on top of the music. It sounds kind of like Barack Obama. I haven't been able to figure out who's actually speaking or where the speech comes from, but it's one of those kind of philosophical speeches talking about death and life and how it all connects us together. And I think anytime you can put some type of existential, philosophical type spoken word speech over ambient music, it can kind of take it to another level. And I think it works really well on this track. So I've been going back to this track and this release by Mark McGuire a lot as of late. It's one of my more recent favorites.
That's great. I can't wait to dig in some more. And yeah, when I was looking into this track too, I also was like, what does that word mean, Anhedonia? And was equally surprised to find the meaning, especially considering what a contrast the movement and this propulsive kind of energy of the song is with a word that means the inability to feel pleasure. You know, it's a symptom of depression as well as other mental health disorders, as you know, it's defined on Google.
Well, sometimes ambient music and soothing music can help.
Yeah,
help
it can
in
be
those
the antidote.
times of darkness. So yeah, maybe this is the antidote to that.
Exactly.
To that feeling.
Well, we're not doctors, but we'll prescribe you this song and see how it goes. Thank you so much, Alex. This has been such a lovely episode. I hope listeners have enjoyed. I'm glad that we got to start and end with a pick from you, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from you more on In Our Headphones.
Yeah, thanks, Isabel. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for now, here's a little more of Mark McGuire with Anhedonia. Again, you just heard some of the song Anhedonia from Mark McGuire's new album of the same name. That song was chosen by Alex Reuter, and on this episode we also heard from Roddy, Nikpour, Brit, Hansen, and Dusty Henry, and me, Isabel Khalili. And as I've mentioned before, you can find all the music from this episode on our In Our Headphones playlists, available on both Spotify and YouTube. You can find links to those on the In Our Headphones podcast page on KEXP.org. And I know that all of these songs are available on Bandcamp, and that's a great place to go if you want to buy music from artists who make your life better. And speaking of making your life better through music, KEXP is an independent nonprofit radio station, so all of our programming, including this podcast, is made possible by the support of our listeners. If you'd like to join in supporting this work, you can make a donation of $6 a month at kexp.org/headphones. We also love hearing from you. If you have feedback or ideas about the series, you can reach out to us at headphones@kexp.org. In Our Headphones is hosted and produced by Janice Headley and me, Isabel Khalili. Audio was mixed by Emily Fox and mastered by William Myers, and our director of editorial is Larry Mizell Jr. Our theme song is How Ma by the band Chinese American Bear. Next week, Albina will be joining us to share some rock-heavy tracks from Spain and Latin America, so stay tuned. I'm Isabel Khalili. See you next time on In Our Headphones from listener-powered KEXP, where the music matters.